Internets, welcome once again to another episode of StepOff Radio. Today we have a special guest on today's episode. He's an artist, an activist, a true revolutionary, and just an overall generous, kind, amazing person in every sense of the word. A true legend in the game. Internets, please welcome the one and only Brother Ali. Thank you for joining us on the show today, man.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. May we be worthy of people's good opinions.
Of course, man. So just to hop into the questions, one of the many things that you're known for is how authentic you are in both your music and, just you as a person, even on your podcast. So to kind of begin the show, I wanted to ask you, where does that come from? You're just very honest about your life and your challenges. Is that something that comes easy, especially, like in a genre where artists feel free to kind of like embellish the truth or just be outright, dishonest?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've always I've never really had like an established place where I belong in culture and society. And so I've always just found that if I be myself, then the people that I'm meant to connect with, the connection will be really real. And it's both in my personal life and also in the music that I make and what I put out into the world. So it's like I just, I try to be as sincerely myself as possible. But now that I have an audience, I also try to consider the fact that people are listening from a variety of different places, in different parts of the world and things like that. So I do try to be considerate of everybody. But I've just found that there's no built-in group or audience for me, in public or in private. So, but if I be sincere and just be genuine, then all the connections will be really real. It'll be based on what's true about me. So, it's in a lot of ways, it's really selfish. Like a lot of people want to be. There's different motivations when we get into music and just putting stuff out into the world. Some people want power. Some people want fame. Some people want to have money. Some people want, and we all want some mixture of these things. They're like we have an ego, so like there's. But for me, more than anything, I want to be understood and I want to be validated. That's not necessarily a good thing always, but it's true. And so I feel like if I am my truest self, then whoever likes me really likes me.
Absolutely. And I think that sincerely comes through in, both your music and, your podcast and even just, your interactions with fans. You always keep it real and you always keep it 100%. Like I was listening to your podcast the other day and like I noticed that you even kept stuff like in like pausing because someone was singing or like you kept in a yawn. And I'm just like, because I think from a journalist standpoint, I'm like, oh, wow, I would have taken that out. But it's just so real and just authentic.
Yeah, and the last couple episodes of the podcast, I've been doing them myself, just because I was on tour, and we actually got a new brother that's starting to edit our podcast, and so so some of that might have been laziness, you know what I mean, or some of it might have just been like, man, I just need to leave this. I don't have time necessarily to go through. But yes, I do try to leave a lot of things, in. We try to make the balance between, is this a enjoyable listening experience for the listener too, like that. And it's kind of what I was saying earlier, is that I want to be aware of people's experience as well. Like there's a fine line between saying I'm just me, and then you're cruel to people, or you're not conscientious of people, or you're not considerate. You know what I mean? So you want to. There's a fine line between being authentic and being um, callous, and I don't want to be callous, but I do. I want to represent things as they are.
Yeah, most definitely. Um, Yeah, so like moving on to like our next question, one of the things that you've brought up is that like when people interview you or when they have you on shows, one of the first things they bring up is that you're albino and that you're legally blind, and that's something that you bring up a lot about like your music and kind of like your experience. I wanted to kind of ask what was it like growing up in your younger years in school in Minneapolis, and what was like your household upbringing like, growing up and kind of always being, kind of different?
Yeah. So I actually didn't get to Minneapolis until I was 14. We lived in the Midwest though, like other cities in the Midwest that are really similar. And we also moved a lot, so I was always a new kid in school, and just really feeling like alone, feeling like an outsider, feeling like I said earlier, like I didn't have any place to fit in. And then I would say one of my most defining experiences in life that I do talk about a lot is that I had a really particularly bad year with just being dehumanized and spoken about like I wasn't a person because of looking different, and also the disability stuff that comes along with it. And my mom wanted to dye my hair. And she was like, basically, we could change your appearance when we go to the next school so that you could fit in better. And so we went through this whole process of dyeing my hair, and she got me tinted glasses so people couldn't see that my eyes are red. And it was a major process to go through to try to get, because hair dye works with the color that's in your hair. And so since I don't have any, my hair turned purple. They were trying to give me blonde hair, so I just looked like a standard issue white boy.
Mhm.
Um, and it was really difficult to do. And then so finally we got it figured out, and I realized like I'm gonna have to come back here every 2 weeks or a month and get this re-dyed, because the hair that naturally grows out of my head is like a secret. And I realized like, oh, I'm keeping who I really am a secret to try to be accepted by the very people that are making me feel terrible. And my mom was a white lady, but she was probably Eastern European, and she was adopted by Scandinavian people, by Norwegian people in Wisconsin. And so she dyed her hair blonde. She dyed her hair blonde to fit in with her family, so that she could look like the family. So I was actually, it made me really, I was really depressed. This was like when I was like 7, 8 years old. So I went to school, and there was a black woman that worked at the school that basically used music to teach me about culture and history and race relations and things like that. And she basically showed me that she talked about the idea of black is beautiful, like when black artists started not perming their hair and wearing afros and natural hair and things like that. And she was like, we had to, in order to be free, we had to accept ourselves and learn to love ourselves the way we are, and not change our appearance to look more like the people that were oppressing us and that had enslaved us. And that really resonated with me, and I realized like, okay, my mom was trying to help me, but she doesn't know really what it is to have an appearance that's unacceptable. Not in that same way. And so I just realized at that point, like, okay, you know, there are people in America that understand things that others don't understand. You know what I mean? The world is in America to white people and to non-white people is not the same, and there's wisdom associated with that, and there's something here in terms of how to live. And so that started me on just the belief that, or the understanding that different people are experiencing the world differently. So I think that really started me down the road of expressing myself like that, but then also specifically all of the important people in my life were black from the time that and I didn't have a community before that, from the time I was like 7, 8 years old on. And I realized like, okay, my community and my friends and their parents and their families and all this kind of stuff, my black friends, my white family does not know about them. And they actually have been taught lies about them, that they're not as intelligent, they're not as good, they're not as moral, they're not fully dynamic human beings, you know. And I'm like, it's a lie. Like the world is being told a lie about these people, about black people specifically. And so when hip hop came along, I really thought like, okay, this is the music that will show the world who my friends really are, because all of humanity is in this music. So, you know, and then that's what led me to Islam. Hip hop is what led me to Islam. And I started looking into Islam like, oh, maybe there's some truth here. Like I fell in love with Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali. And I was like, these people seem to be connected to something that's universal and true. And it seems to have, done so much for them. But America thinks it's the enemy.
Mhm.
Like white America thinks it's the most scary idea in the world. Like, what are they so afraid of, and why do my heroes seem to believe in it so much? And I looked into Islam as a teenager, and was like, oh wow, I believe in this too. So it's feeling already out of place, and then finding a home in places that my country and society don't necessarily respect or appreciate, has just kind of been the story of my life. And even hip hop music, hip hop music in the beginning, when I got into it, was not mainstream. Only a certain subculture of people really listened to it. And what everybody believed about it wasn't true. They're like, it's all negative, and they glorify violence and all this stuff. And I'm listening to Public Enemy and Boogie Down Productions and, Queen Latifah. And I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. So my whole life is just living, finding so much beauty and truth in places that people misunderstand.
Yeah, absolutely. Like actually, I wanted to say like you said how like your mom like had you like helped dye your hair, and I remember how you specifically talk about that on the song "Pray for Me," and on
Yeah.
all the beauty in this whole life. It's one of my favorite songs, and you go into real detail like just being kind of ostracized, dehumanized, and kind of following up and like on that, like you've said in the past that you often find yourself going back and forth between like the black and the white world. No one, when people come across you, they don't know what box to put you in necessarily if they don't know you and they just come across you. And you experience this concept that we define as race in a very unique perspective. And I was like even in hip hop, like you said, like I know that you said in the past, like you've been invited to speak, like at like conferences for like black like entertainers, rappers, and you'd be like, well, just for the record, like I'm black. So yeah, what's that like experiencing like this very unique construct?
Yeah, it is really interesting. I was actually there was a TV show called Black Lightning, where the whole idea is like this was right around the time that they were working on Black Panther, the movie, it's like a black superhero film, that they were going to do a TV show, and they did it. They made this TV show that was on for several seasons, and they reached out to me saying, the one of the villains in the show, we want him to be a black albino, and we think you're perfect for this role.
Mm.
And so my manager at the time was just like, hey, Ali is not black and he does not want this job. And what we actually knew a black albino rapper named Crondon, Marvin Jones, who's from LA. And so my manager was like, this is who you need to talk to. And that person, Crondon, ended up getting the role. And he did a great job. And now he's a full on actor. So it's interesting, man. Yeah, I mean, I think with being albino, like part of why it happened for me the way it did is that albinos are in every ethnic group, but there are way more among Black Africans, like sub-Saharan Africans, and it's also a lot more noticeable. So around the world, both Black people and non-Black people associate albinism with Blackness. So wherever I am in the world, like I was in Australia one time and I was walking with two friends. One was an African American guy, a Black American guy, and another one was a Nigerian brother. So one of them's name is um, Ashanti, um, and the other brother, I'm spacing on his name right now. I can see his face. He's actually the president of Def Jam now.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so I'm walking with these two like Black African brothers, and Tunji, his name is Tunji, and so we're walking, and we're just in this open air market in Australia, and this like African man is walking towards us, and of the three of us, he looked directly at me and he said, "Assalamu alaikum, are you okay?" And I was like, how did he know I was Muslim? First of all, I didn't have a kufi on. I didn't have anything outwardly Islamic on. Um, and I was like, "Walaikum salam. Yes, I'm okay. Thank you. Are you? How are you? And both these, like Tunji and Ashanti, are like, why did he say hi to you? Like, why did he talk to you? I'm just like, man, that's my experience. Um, and so yeah, it's interesting because like I've had the police show up and think I was black, and and I know the difference. Like when the police think I'm black, I'm in danger. When the police know I'm white, they're there to help. I've just experienced it plain as day, you know. Um, and so, yeah, man, it's just I also know that so many people that are in white bodies live in a white experience. They've never experienced that, and so they just don't know it, and they don't understand it, and it can be it's extremely difficult to introduce the idea to them. But most of my fan base, most of my listeners are white, and so I've come to see it as a beautiful opportunity that I have. But it's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to do. We just did a I just had Ant on my podcast, my producer, and Ant is black, white, and native. And but I think most people when they see him, they think he's white. And so he was telling me on the podcast, he's like, "Man, you lost half your fan base when you started getting really political. I think half your listeners stopped listening to you." So I just posted this clip, and like all these people came out of the woodwork to tell me that they don't. All these like white listeners or former listeners, I guess, in the comment section are just like, "Yeah, you got all of this woke BS and all this stuff," and I discovered that he was right. A lot of people had stopped listening to me.
That's a very interesting point that you bring up because it actually brings up into like our next question. It's odd to think that like people would stop rocking with you because of like being outspoken. Because at least for me, like I've been listening to you since like I was like 15. So like for the past like almost like 18 plus years. And one of your most popular songs is Uncle Sam Goddamn, which was released like in 2007 during like the Iraq and Afghanistan war. And in a weird way, like that song is more relevant than it was 18 years ago when it came out, like in the Bush era, post 9/11. So, you've always been political. You've always been outspoken. Like I feel like from the very beginning of your career. And I guess kind of going into that, like let's go in Uncle Sam Goddamn. Actually, like what was the inspiration and the writing process behind that track, and where was your head at the time when you wrote that song?
Um, I just yeah, it was the Bush era, it was the war thing. I've always talked about that stuff, even on my first two albums. Um, or I had a demo tape and then my debut out. My demo tape was called Rites of Passage. That was like I made in a hotel room by myself. Um, and then my debut album, my actual first album was Shadows on the Sun. And those themes are in everything that I've done. But in that song, that album particularly, it just came up as an idea for a song, just like they all do. And I actually wrote it to a totally different piece of music. I wrote it to this thing that sounded like it was this weird, really off kilter kind of beat that felt kind of insane and like it felt like it was spinning. I remember the beat just felt like it was spinning. It felt like a circus or something. And the rhythm was all different and everything. And so I wrote the song just thinking it would be this weird kind of quirky thing. And then when I got to Ant's house, he played the beat that ended up being Uncle Sam Goddamn, this like blues thing. And I started rapping it just kind of cool and smooth. And we both got goosebumps and was like, oh, this is hard. This is dope. And so, yeah, it was my first song to go viral. It was one of the first underground hip hop independent songs when YouTube first came around that started getting millions of views on its own. And it wasn't being played on MTV or BET, but on YouTube and just virally, it went really big. And what I discovered is that when that was the only statement that people heard from me, they like people would project their opinions onto me because of the way that I look and the way they perceive me. So I discovered that there's a lot of like white Joe Rogan type of dudes that they just heard an anti-government song and they look at me and what I look like and I might look like them, and so they're like, that guy feels the way I feel. You know what I mean? So just the idea of like America, because no matter what side you're on in terms of politics, everybody agrees that America has deep problems. Nobody thinks America is a good situation. The one thing that everybody agrees on is this is not okay. It's just who's to blame, what the problems are and what to do about it, those are the things that are disagreed upon. So a lot of people, what I discovered is that a lot of people loved that song, and they just kind of superimposed their beliefs onto what I was saying. And it wasn't until later that I started talking about it more, and they started realizing like, oh, no, this guy's coming after white supremacy, and like this guy is coming after, you know what I mean? And I think it was when it became extremely clear, like the white supremacy thing was at the center of the conversation for me. I think that's when people started feeling betrayed. They actually felt like, man, you betrayed me, and it's like, no, you misunderstood me. You know what I mean? You misunderstood me.
Yeah, like because like I find that like it's so surprising that people like they ascribe like their own thoughts and interpretations of you, because like from the very beginning, like that was actually my first introduction into your music. I remember like it was going viral on YouTube, and a friend said like, hey, you need to check out this rapper Brother Ali, like he's talking about like politics, because like at that time I was listening to like I was like in the Public Enemy and like old school Ice Cube, Mortal Technique, Jedi Mind Tricks. And when I
Yeah.
saw that video, I was like, oh my God, like this is incredible. And then I learned that, you were working with Ant and that you're part of, Rhymesayers. Is it true that after that video went viral and you performed that on like Conan O'Brien on like the Late Show too, is it true that the Department of Homeland Security like froze money transfers from the record label and that Verizon removed you from a lineup on a show they were sponsoring?
Yeah, yep. We were in Australia, a different Australia trip, but we were performing. We were doing a tour there, and the promoter wired the money to Minneapolis to the record label, and they were my management at the time too. And yeah, Department of Homeland Security seized it, and I had to get on the phone with them for them to release my money. And that was the first time that they did that type of thing. But I mean, it's been 18 years of that, off and on. Like I'll go through periods where they completely leave me alone. But I just went to America for a tour, and I happened to land in Minneapolis in America on election night, and they harassed me for 2 hours. I was in the office for 2 hours, and it was a problem, and it's been like that. And yeah, I've had all sorts of. Yeah, I was supposed to do a full tour actually on that Verizon. They were sponsoring it, and they were at least good enough to tell us, like, "Hey, we can't do this because of this song you have," and it's because they were sponsoring music tours at that time. Verizon Wireless was, and they did one with Akon, and Akon was filmed doing this like sexy dance thing on stage with a young woman, and it turned out she was underage, and it turned out that she was the daughter of like the prime minister or something like that of the country he was in. And so Fox News actually went after Verizon, and they said, if we do this next tour and you're on it, Fox News is going to look into what are we sponsoring, and that song specifically is going to make Fox News come after our company. And so it's not, we invited you because we wanted you to do it, but we just can't. We're sorry, I have to release you. So that was a full tour that I was supposed to do. But what's amazing is that once that tour got canceled, I actually got booked to do a tour with Rakim and Ghostface Killer. And I did a full tour with them with a live band, and it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. So, when one door closes, another one opens, and I believe in the creator. So it's like, you know no one can stop what the creator has for you. So it's always fine. But we do sacrifice a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a negative comes a positive, and it's really, it's nice that you're able to make a positive outcome out of like a negative situation. Um, and like you said, like so like throughout the entirety of your career, for the most part, like you've been no stranger to like controversy or peaks and valleys in your career. And last year, you actually did a full-length duo project with producer Unjust, who was an anti-Zionist Jew himself. And this was for your album Love and Service. And in prior interviews, you said the original distribution partner for that album, they pulled out after October 7th because of both you and Unjust's support for Palestine. Did that come as a surprise when the distributor just abruptly just pulled out of, distributing that album?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because they're not just a distributor, but they're a major powerhouse in the industry. It's a company that I've done a lot of business with over the years. And yeah, they were supposed to distribute actually the two albums, both Love and Service and then Satisfied Soul that comes out next month. They were supposed to distribute both of those. And we had everything but the contract and didn't think that it was that important to hurry up and lock it in but we were talking about budgets and timelines, and we on our end spent a lot of money to have to start the manufacturing and the publicity. I mean, we spent money, a lot of money, thinking that we were going to have this distribution partner and it was going to be, this great thing. And then they just ghosted us. They never said why they were doing that, but they were making direct posts. Like executives in the company were making posts talking to their camera on their phone, completely in support of Israel. Nothing said about the Palestinians. Whenever people just focus on Hamas, they're just like Hamas this, Hamas that, Hamas this. It's like that's the N word. That's the equivalent of saying the N word. That's the equivalent of calling, Mexican immigrants the things that they say, rather than saying families or people or children or elders or communities or neighborhoods. They just use these catchphrases which just mean enemy. There are no civilians. Like there are people that believe that. And when people just use the word Hamas, what they're saying is there are no civilians. Everybody, just by virtue of being Palestinian, they're the enemy and they've got to be eliminated. So kill them, just go ahead and kill them all. Like it's a genocidal thing to only use that phrase in talking about a full group of people or any phrase like it. And so yeah, me and Unjust made this whole album. It's a beautiful album. It's called Love and Service. Songs like We're Worthy of Love, Awaken, talking about like the spiritual reality of like the human beings are sleeping and when they die, they wake up. So die before you die and awaken to, all this really, talking about friendship and love and all this stuff. And there's one song on there that's called The Collapse, which is about the collapse of the empire. And I mean, but then also I went really hard on social media after October 7th. Like on October 7th, I posted a big Palestinian flag and I was just like, do not forget that these people have been occupied. There's been, countless atrocities. They've been kicked out of their land. They've been raped and slaughtered and massacred with all of the biggest governments in the world backing it up. I said that like on October, the night of October, the day of October 7th, and was like, man, because I knew what the response was going to be like. And so, yeah, I mean, just not only that, but, and I don't name names, but one of the in our biggest live touring and performing market, the biggest show promoter in that market um did a lot to try to make me be quiet and to not talk about Palestine, to not talk about Gaza, and I never disparaged anybody else. I never disparaged Israel or Jewish people. I just talked about the human rights of the Palestinians. That's it. And so yeah, man, it's that was, and I had a full year, a full calendar year without a paid show. The first time in my career. I'm a really well established and very reliable touring artist, like live artist. Me and Immortal Technique and Atmosphere and Tech Nine, we're able to perform. If we wanted to do 200 shows a year, we could easily do that. And there are plenty of years that we've done upwards of 150 shows, and not one single show for a solid year. And it's because of insisting on talking about the Palestinians.
Yeah, like, and again, kind of going back, like this is also like this is nothing necessarily new for you. Like you've been a very vocal support of Gaza and Palestine and speaking up against the genocide. And like, and I do, yeah, I remember like you were doing an interview on the Muslim Centric podcast last year. And you were just saying how like the whole being outspoken and in support of Palestine, the whole like industry has just kind of, turned its back. And you were saying like, normally like you would be on these tours or headline or something like that, and it's just like just nothing.
Yeah. I mean, I lost the Verizon Wireless tour, or, there's been times where, I somebody at a TV show would invite me to be on it. I got invited to be on David Letterman. I got invited to be on Conan O'Brien a second time, and I had amazing ideas for how to do those. Like I was gonna do, Jackson Brown and Cornell West were gonna come on David Letterman with me, and the guitar player for Rage Against the Machine, Tom Morello, was gonna do Conan with me. And we had this whole like for that one, we had this whole band and like these Muslim women dancers, and like it was so dope. Both these ideas were crazy. And the person that we worked at the show, the booker, but both of those shows was really excited. They're like, "Yeah, we can't wait. We'll get right back to you." And both of them hit us back and were like, "No, we can't do that. We can't have you on at all. I'm sorry. Like we just can't do it. I want to, but we can't." So I've lost individual things before that I know it's because of the message, but I've never had the faucet turned all the way off like I did last year. The faucet was turned all the way off. And, but what's interesting about that, again, I believe in the creator and I have a good opinion of the creator. And I realize now, like, oh, somehow I could go a full year without any money coming in. I mean, so we didn't make our money back on that album, and we didn't get booked for any shows at all. Even during the pandemic, I was doing shows in parking lots with people in their cars and performing outdoors with Dave Chappelle and all this kind of stuff. Like, this was the first time that it was ever zero shows. But I'm like, oh, okay. So I spoke out. I said what I wanted to say. I made the music I wanted to make. The whole industry walked away from me, including people that love me. Like some of the people that wouldn't book me, I know they love me. They bring their friends, they bring their kids, they bring, take pictures with me. They're like, I know that they grew up on my music. I know that they love me personally, but it's just talking about Palestine. You can't do it. So, but I survived it. My family survived it. You know what I mean? My business partner survived it. Like we survived that. So it's like, okay, you only embolden me. You know what I mean? I know better now. I know that I can survive without the music industry participating even a little bit. It's not ideal. It's not fun, but I can do it. We can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, it goes without saying, your music is rooted in this position that is blatantly anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, and just this rallying cry against white supremacy in the United States. And you've always discussed these themes of like, racial inequality and just critiquing the U.S. government, and it's put you at odds with the music industry at various points in your career. But like, it's just crazy to see like it just completely shut off, And I know that, and you haven't been the only person either affected by this. I kind of wanted to, kind of going along in that same line. I wanted to get your thoughts. What are your thoughts on mainstream hip hop artists, or even independent artists for that matter, just being silent on the ongoing genocide in Gaza and Greater Palestine?
It's extremely disappointing, because when I came into hip hop, this was a rebellious music that was against the mainstream, against the status quo, and would always be that. And it wasn't always stuff that I agreed with. Like I didn't agree with Luke and Two Live Crew. You know what I mean? When they were like, no, we want to make music completely about sex. We're allowed to do that. I didn't necessarily believe in that. I mean, I was 13 when it happened, and I'm a 13-year-old boy, so I wasn't necessarily mad at it. But like I don't believe in that. That's not my issue. But the fact that they stood up and said like, if other people have the right to talk about what they want, if they have the right to make movies about whatever they want, if they have the right to make Hustler magazine, then we have the right to do it. And they stood up for that. And Ice-T stood up and said, if black people can kill other black people in hip hop, why can't I make a song called Cop Killer? You know what I mean? And I wouldn't have made a song called Cop Killer, but I like the fact that he was standing up for that. And over and over and over again. And then there were the artists that I did believe in, and I do believe in what they're saying. You know, again, like Public Enemy and all the people that we're talking about. Now, it seems like that edginess of hip hop has just been turned against. Um, Again, still, you know, you can talk about killing yourself with drugs. You can talk about disrespecting women and using them as sexual objects. You can talk about killing other people in your community. But like, what's the part where we actually look at the power structure? What's the part where we actually get into that? And I'm just not seeing it, you know, for the most part. Um, you know, what the people that I've seen actually be really vocal are Yasin Bey, Most Def, and then other people who aren't necessarily rappers. You know, and there are other people like, of course, Immortal Technique is always right there. Of course, Chuck D is always right there. Of course, you know, Dead Prez is always right there. Of course, you know, there's a number of people that are always, that's their address, you know, my friends. But, you know, the list is a lot long. It's like almost everybody else didn't say anything or said very little or the bare minimum. Like maybe they put their name on a you know on a petition or something like that. But in terms of like looking into the camera and saying this is wrong, that's why it was easier to just not invite me to anything. Because it's like, okay, if you want to do a festival, you can have underground hip hop without any, and nobody will say anything about Palestine. You can have the rest of hip hop at your event. So you just don't invite Brother Ali or Immortal Technique, or you know what I mean, or Yasin, and that's all you got to do. Everybody else, you can still have everybody else. Nobody will say anything, you know. But and I also understand too, you know, I understand that the consequences are very real, and you know, everybody's not built like that. So
What advice do you have for artists who are concerned about blowback from the industry or backlash for fans for speaking out against apartheid or just generally sharing support for Palestine? Because you've said also that, you know, like you've hired a publicist, you know, to like, you know, get you shows and interviews. You've asked people to professionally look at your social media to see if you're shadow banned. You know, what advice do you have for artists who are maybe a little bit leery or want to speak out and use their platform but aren't sure how?
man, everybody's walk is going to be different. I'll say the reason why I was able to survive all these bumps and twists and turns is a couple things. Number one, a direct relationship with the listeners is extremely important. Like having some way to communicate with them. Like if I didn't have my podcast, I don't know if we would have made it. You know what I mean? I think the podcast is the only reason we survived that year because people listen to the podcast. So I was deeply shadow banned on social media. So my followers weren't even seeing my posts. But we had already built up a listenership of a strong 1 to 2,000 people every single week will listen to the podcast. They're extremely locked in. And so when the Love and Service album came out, we did sell 700 copies. And, you know, that wasn't enough to break even, but it was enough to earn a lot of our money back that we put into the project. And that's one of the ways that we survived it. I did a songwriting workshop that I always do. And again, I think that got out there because of the podcast. And having, you know, people's emails and things where we could reach out directly to people. I think that's why we survived. So having that direct connection with the audience, um, you know, also I think that yeah, you know, there's also like personal lifestyle stuff too. You know, like I'm very grateful that I'm not married to a materialistic woman. You know, I think that's really important. Like if we want to be people of integrity, we can't be materialistic. Like we can't be in this for money. We can't be in it for fame. Because if you're in it for either one of those things, those are the things that that will be taken away. You know what I mean? So if we set our lives up that like my life doesn't require me to make a whole lot of money, my life just requires me to make it. You know what I mean? So I don't even know if my family noticed the difference. Like we didn't travel this year. We did actually. My whole family went to West Africa last year. Um, you know, but it's just if your lifestyle is set up in a way where you require a lot of money, then you're not going to be able to make principled decisions. And if you're in it for fame, same thing. You're not going to be able to make principled decisions. You have to, like, if you're a person that you got to know what's actually motivating me. Like, there's different things that motivate people that are public people, and we all say it's just the message and it's just the art. And okay, that's great, but also we all have an ego. And like, what does my ego self want out of this deal? So some people want power, some people just want to be have money, some people want attention, some people want fame, some people, different people want different things. My thing is, I want to be understood and I want to be validated because my whole life I felt misunderstood and invalidated. Now, I'd be more powerful if I didn't even want those things, but I do want them. I know that. But I can tell the truth and have a smaller fan base. I, I can tell the truth the way I see it, and even if it's a smaller fan base, if they're there and they really understand where I'm coming from, and they're like, "Yo, we're here for what you really mean." I know enough about myself to know I'd rather have a small fan base that really is on the same page and is here for what I want to give than have a bigger number of people that I feel like these people like me for reasons that I don't even agree with. Like when my career was at its biggest, highest point, I knew that there's people in this audience that like me for racist reasons. I know it. And it really bothered me. I didn't like that. I met people all the time that would be like, "Yeah, I love your music." And I'd be like, "Thank you." And they'd be like, "Man, because I just hate," they wouldn't say black, but they would be like, "I hate these guys with their gold chains and, all this stuff." And I'd be like, "Oh, okay. Who are your favorite artists?" And they're all white. And they got nothing to do with each other other than the fact that we're all white. They'd be like, "Man, you, Bubba Sparks, um, you know what I'm saying? Paul Wall, uh, Aesop Rock. Like, what does Paul Wall have to do with Aesop Rock? I mean, except for that they are both dope rappers. You know what I mean? They're both dope. They're both legitimately dope. But I'm happier now. You know what I mean? And it's good to know, like, what do I actually want out of this? What does my ego want? Not what's the highest version of me want. What does my lower self really want? And for me, it's like, man, I want to be understood and validated. So it actually helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as with everything, intention is important. And you have to make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons in any kind of art, because especially with music, these are, they can be unpopular positions, and you're definitely not going to, material fame or gain cannot be the end goal, especially when, taking positions like this.
Yeah, and I mean it, and it's not to say that you can't be successful. That's another thing that I do want people to know. I have not worked for another person in 22 or 3 years. I've been you know what I mean? I've fed my family doing what I love and saying what I believe to be true and taking these positions. I fed my family like this for over 20 years. And there are times where it is lucrative. And there are plenty of people, you know, Immortal Technique owns, valuable property in New York City. David Banner is doing very well. You know what I mean? Whatever you think about what Chappelle has, the way that he's been outspoken, he's done very well. There are people better than all of us, honestly, but Yassine Bey is somebody who has always spoken out and has tried to, like, they've tried to make him a movie star over and over and over again, and he keeps on walking away from it because he's like, "I don't want to be beholden to you. I don't want your money to control me." you know it's not for necessarily political reasons, but Atmosphere was in a similar situation where the music industry really wanted them to be the next Eminem. They wanted them to be Macklemore before Macklemore, and they made the decision to, like, no, I don't want to do that because you're not going to make me this huge star, because then you could take it away from me and I'm done. We want to do this forever. We don't want to be done when you say we're done. And so they didn't do it for artistic reasons. Um, But yeah, so I mean, it's also important to know like there's a lot of sacrifice in it, but there also can be. I mean, Sage Francis is another one. I gotta shout out Sage Francis because his song actually came before mine about Palestine. And Sage wasn't somebody who was really up on the Palestine issue. You know, like I started talking about it at the beginning of my career, but Sage got up to speed and got a song out before I did. You know what I mean? And he had a festival planned, and his festival got canceled. He was about to do the second year of his own festival that he was curating, and that got shut down.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
but also Sage doesn't work for anybody, so it's like it's still worth it. There's a lot of sacrifice, but it is worth it. So I would not discourage anybody from doing what you love and telling the truth and serving the cause.
And I definitely feel like it's needed, especially like in these times. In another week, Donald Trump will be returning to office here in the U.S. And Trump has vowed that he will reinstate his Muslim ban, that he will ban refugees from Gaza, and Trump's policies from the very beginning have stoked and encouraged Islamophobia here in the States, and especially now since they're being implemented under this false guise of fighting anti-Semitism. Do you believe it's important that artists continue to create music that expresses dissent and challenges oppressive systems and institutions?
I mean, it's always been such a powerful thing, It's always been it's always been at the heart of the movement in so many ways, and it really pains me to see how silent artists are right now across genres. I mean, it's really troubling. Like I kind of can't believe that there's not a hip hop and punk rock and across the board. You know what I mean? Like there's not a response to this stuff. But also, I mean, I do see, like I saw what happened to me, and that could happen to almost anybody. You know what I mean? Um, and yeah, like I just see how interested everybody got when Kendrick was dismantling Drake, and how excited everybody was for that, and how happy everybody was for it, and how all of a sudden people had all this intention and attention and time and energy to put into breaking down what lyrics mean, and are any of the possible double, triple, quadruple entendres, and like just long videos of exegesis about lyrical content and double meanings and stuff when a black artist is tearing down another black artist. And this is somebody that we see as like a voice of the people. And I mean, I've been out in protests when young black organizers were in the street and they were playing "We Gonna Be All Right," and it was like that was a major moment. People that felt so much like aggravation and despair and just deep hurt. Yeah, man. I know that when that song would come on, it's all okay. Like he said it's all right, and it was all right. I've seen that in people. Oh, I also have to shout out Bamboo, the great Bamboo, man. Bamboo is and his whole crew as well. I gotta shout out Rocky Rivera and Bamboo. I mean, they're some of the great ones. Um, so when that music exists, it does really help. And the fact that it's really missing now, man, and I'm not sure. I can't wrap my mind around that. You know, it's I just feel very sad for that. I don't know. I can't believe it.
Yeah, it definitely feels like there's a significant piece of that rebellious spirit in hip hop that's definitely missing right now, and hopefully we'll definitely see a return to it, especially like given we're in for a rough ride for the next. Well, we've been in a tough spot for a minute now, but the next several years will definitely be a upward battle. Kind of a moving on from politics. I kind of wanted to discuss, your experience with your faith in Islam a little bit. I know we touched about this a little bit earlier in the interview, but you took Shahada at the age of 15, and I wanted to ask, growing up, was religion something that was present in your household as a child and a young person?
No, not really. I mean, we did. My parents went to church, but I discovered later that neither one of them actually believed in the doctrine of the church, and it wasn't surprising to me at all. It just felt like a nice social thing that people did. Like my parents are, white, and I would say working class people from Madison, Wisconsin. They grew up in the 50s and 60s, and it was just something that nice, polite people did. And they didn't really think much about, do I really believe this, or do I really, um, but I always personally, I always felt like I could talk directly to the creator at all times. And I wasn't mad at Christianity. I felt like, yeah, I mean, these are people that are talking about God, and that's fine. It wasn't until I started really getting into Islam that I realized, like, oh, there actually is something that I really truly do believe in every aspect of it. And when I say that, there were people that be like, "You believe in this and you believe in that," and I mean, there's so much false information and there's so much slander and slurring against Islam, that people have been given such a distorted picture of it, that when you say that, people think that's crazy. But if if people were to really understand and know what that religion is, and the overwhelming majority of people don't know the first thing about Islam, and they don't really care to learn. Um, but so no, I didn't have that really growing up, but I always believed, and then I had a good opinion of Islam because of hip hop, and then I read Malcolm X, and I think he's the greatest human being that America has ever produced. The second one, in my opinion, is Muhammad Ali. Like, Malcolm and Muhammad Ali are the two greatest people America's ever produced, in my personal opinion. And both of them loved Islam deeply and dearly. And they both started out feeling like Islam is the answer for Black people in America. And by the end of their lives, they realized Islam is the answer for America, period, for everybody involved. And I believed that then, and I believe it now. And, so I do whatever I can to try to share it however I can.
Yeah, because you've actually credited a meeting with KRS One during a lecture, for like reverting, because like he's, if I understand, he's the one that recommended reading the autobiography of Malcolm X.
Yeah, so that was a day that changed my whole life. Like, that was a day that, I believe that the creator not only created the things in the universe, but also created the events created. And so that was a day when I was 13 that, like, KRS-One was my favorite and is still one of my favorite, definitely part of my top five, one of the most influential human beings in my life. And so I was 13, went to a lecture, and I saw him give a lecture, like, and I had never seen a rapper give a lecture before. And so the question and answer period, I asked him if he'd sign a book that he wrote with Nelson George called Stop the Violence. And so hmm, yeah, so he actually brought me on stage, talked to me, told me I should read the autobiography of Malcolm X. But I was on stage with him, and he's really tall. I was 13, so I'm like looking up at him. I'm looking at this podium, and then I'm looking out at the audience because now I'm on stage next to him, and I realized, like, oh, this is what I am. I am him. I'm a rapper that gives lectures. You know what I mean? And to this day, that's what I do. Like, I talked at universities from Princeton and Harvard to Stanford and everything in between. And I gave the keynote speech at the Nobel Peace Prize Forum. And I've, done sermons at mosque all over the world. And, so yeah, that day really was an extremely significant day. And it's the day that he suggested I read Malcolm X. But it was something about him saying, you should read it, that I was like, oh. So while I was reading it, I wasn't just reading it as a story, but like, KRS-One was like, you should read this story. And so I read it as somebody that was like, this story is for me, because KRS-One said it is, and so yeah, I read the book and I was like, when he was in the Nation of Islam, I felt like I want to be like these Muslims he's talking about, but you have to be black to be in the Nation of Islam. So I'm like, I can't be one, but I'll live like them. I believe what they say, and I'll just kind of be in solidarity with them. And then he goes to Malcolm went to Mecca, and he's like, there's people here that would be considered white, but in Islam they're not considered white, and there's human beings. And he came back, and there's a press conference in Harlem where he's saying, if if the people in America who see themselves as white would study Islam, become Muslims, live in Islam, it would help them really be connected with the human family in a way that whiteness has kind of robbed from them. So I was like, okay, good, beautiful. I'm Muslim, and then ever since then I've been trying to learn how to do that. You know what I mean? It's easier to say than it is to do, but it's part of why me and my family live in Istanbul now.
Yeah, and you've definitely, along with your music, like you've made this like a significant part of your life. You helped found the Jamali Project, which is an organization that helps Muslim reverts and spiritual seekers access the beauty of Islam. Can you tell us a little bit about that project and how you got involved?
Yeah, so there was a movement actually. I spent a significant time in the Bay Area, and there's a movement of what they were calling third space, like a third space Islam movement. You know, that was 10 years ago now. And that movement has been really good in some ways and really not so good in other ways. But it was a really interesting idea, and it sparked a really interesting idea where you you don't have to necessarily go to the mosque in order to access Islam and to be together. And so my wife and I were inspired by that movement. And so my wife is a therapist, and so we developed this place. We started by inviting people to our house, honestly. And started realizing like there are people that would either they're Muslim and they don't necessarily feel comfortable going to the mosque for whatever reason. Um, some people aren't Muslim and they're not going to walk into a mosque. They're just not going to do that. And then even when you do go to the mosque, it's like in America, most of the mosques are set up by communities that like a bunch of people came from Pakistan and they want to maintain their Islam, so they make a mosque for them, for their community. So if a person walks in off the street, an American walks in off the street, like it's not set up for them. You know what I mean? It's not set up for us. It's set up for people that from Pakistan trying to hold on to their religion, and that's fine. Like they do whatever they need to do to live. But like that's not going to necessarily work for me and for a lot of the people like me. And so yeah, so we just developed this. We ended up getting a space, and for several years we met every Monday night. We never advertised it. We never publicized it. People weren't allowed to record or take pictures. They could invite their friends, but it could only be word of mouth. We never took donations. We never, so we just didn't do any of the stuff that could be, fame or making money or any of that. We just kept all of that out of it. And it was just this like really sincere gatherings that we did. And now I still do them whenever I go back to Minneapolis. And just at the drop of the dime, we'll have, 50 to 150 people that just really love each other and love the creator and love the tradition. And it's really beautiful. It's one of the most pure things I've ever been a part of.
What is one thing that you think could be done to help reverts? I can imagine that it could be a very isolating and lonely experience if you don't have the support of your family or a community in the place where you live to kind of get that support from.
Yeah, man, I think it's really what I've experienced, and I've helped a lot of people convert. And to this day, like people still come to me and they're like, man, I'm really interested in this Islam thing. And if people seem serious and sincere, like I actually start a correspondence with them. And there's a number of people that I've known for years and years now. And to me, what I find is like, if somebody, converts to Islam, um, if they can find a handful of serious, dedicated Muslim friends, and by a handful, I mean like three, two, three, four, just a few people to do it with, and those people do not have to be, a sheikh in a turban. They don't have to be a preacher. They don't have to be a scholar. But if you just find two or three serious friends that are dedicated, that's going to make all the difference in the world. And it's interesting. I find that like where people are coming from and how they're raised has a lot to do with how willing they are to do that. So I noticed that people that come from white communities don't necessarily always have the experience of needing to be in community to establish a sense of self in the thing that they're doing, because it's like, well, they don't need that in America necessarily. Um, Whereas people who are, when Filipinos become Muslim, when African Americans become Muslim, I mean, African Americans have the biggest communal conversion. The only communal conversion in America is Black Americans. So for a Black person, it's interesting. There's almost less of that specific challenge because you can go to a Black American mosque that's culturally Black, and you're just there with your people, and there's a bunch of Muslims. And that was my experience. I was raised in a Black community, converted in a Black community. I didn't have that particular problem,
Hmm.
you know. Whereas there's a lot of Puerto Ricans and Filipinos, and a lot of white people are converting to Islam. I mean, it's not being reported. I don't know what the true numbers are, but it's a lot of people. Every public Muslim that I talk to has a lot of white people that are coming to them converting to Islam. And to me that's a beautiful thing. And like, I just think that the main thing is to just have a network of friends, even if it's just a few people, and to have some sort of dedicated commitment to learning the religion, even if it's just an hour a week. But there's got to be some dedication to learning that's sustainable, that's ongoing. You know, I think if a person does those two things, they'll probably make it. If you have a circle of friends, and if you have a dedication to growing and learning, you're probably gonna make it. If you don't have those things, you might not. Personally, I don't like the word revert. Everybody can have their own relate, like, you know what I mean? To me, the word revert is just a weird ass word. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's kind of almost like there's this thing, because it's not really a word that we use in English. You know what I mean? And I understand why people say it, because they say the Prophet Muhammad said, every peace be upon him, said everybody is born on the fitrah, which is like the natural way of being human. And Islam is called Deen al Fitra, the religion of that nature. And so, and then the Prophet Muhammad said the child's parents make them something else. So it's like, yes, our nature is totally in alignment with Islam as human beings. But I had to convert. I didn't know how to make wudu. I didn't know how to speak Arabic. I didn't know how to whatever. I was in one lifestyle, and then I had to adopt a new lifestyle. I didn't go back to something that I was ever familiar with. You know what I mean? And then also just the word sounds weird to me, and it's like to me it's important that we are able to talk about Islam and be Muslim in ways that are really natural to us culturally. You know what I mean? And revert is just like, I don't even know what that is. You know what I mean? Like, to me, if somebody were, now I know a bunch of people that were born Muslim into Muslim families, and and then as adults, they didn't really practice. And then something happens where they're like, oh, wow, oh, Islam is actually true. Let me come back. Those are reverts. In my opinion, everybody, like, there are people that really that love that word, and so if that's the case, that's fine. But in my opinion, me and you are converts.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Brother Ali. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate you going into detail about your own spiritual journey. Thank you. Let's talk about the new album, man. You have a new upcoming album that's going to come out next month in February. It's called Satisfied Soul. It's with longtime collaborator Ant of Atmosphere. Can you tell us a little bit about that project and what makes it different from your prior work, and what can fans expect on that new LP?
Man, I left Minneapolis 4 years ago. I left the record label that I was with. I left a lot of stuff that I loved. And not because I didn't love it anymore, but just because I just really felt like for me and my family, it was time to start a new chapter of our lives and to allow ourselves to grow in this new way. So started our own label, me and BK1, who's my first DJ, my first collaborator, the first person to really believe and invest in me. Literally my day one. He and I started the Travelers platform together, Travelers podcast, Travelers Media. And so a year ago, I went back to Minneapolis to be with Ant, who is another one of my dear friends, dearest friends. And I've made all of my favorite music with him. So I went back to see about making some music together. And it was just such a beautiful healing experience. It was so joyful. We made music that just came so like easily, but it just felt so perfect. Like everything on there it just was like, man, the experience was just a really beautiful one. So that's why I called it Satisfied Soul. Just like, man, I had some pain leaving Minneapolis and leaving the record label and leaving all that stuff. It was very painful. Um, and so I went back there hoping to heal. And when I got there, I realized like I'm already healed. I'm totally happy with everybody and everything. I don't hold any grudges. I don't, I'm just happy and grateful. And so we ended up just making an album about feeling that way. And a lot of it is just really high level rap music, just me rap, like Ant making traditional beats, me rapping to him. Um, it just came like so natural and so good. And to us, it felt like this, this is our classic sound. In a lot of ways, it's some of the best music we've ever made. And, so we released five of the songs, actually six of the songs already. The full thing goes on streaming services, like you said, February 14th. That's the day I took Shahada. I took Shahada on a Valentine's Day in 1993. So that's the day that the whole album starts streaming. And also the tapes and the CDs have come out at that time. The vinyl is so beautiful, but that's still being manufactured. So that ships in March, which is Ramadan. Um, And man, I just feel so grateful. Me and Ant just did a tour, 22 cities together. We ended in Minneapolis with a sold out show at First Avenue. It just feels really blessed. It just feels really like special, feels right. It just feels so good, man. I'm really beyond grateful. And so the music's gonna come out. I'm happy for people to hear it. But I just recently saw this interview with Prince, where Prince was saying for an artist, the art is successful when we make it and we made what we wanted to make. That's success to an artist. Then there's this whole other thing, and the Love and Service album that you were talking about. I love that album. I love it. It's some of my favorite work I've ever done. I feel like nobody knows it except for the 1,000 people that listen to my podcast, even know it happened. But it's a success to me because I made exactly what I wanted to make. And I made a dear friend in Unjust. Like me and Unjust will be friends for life. So it's a success. But it's that part of it is strange. But man, I'm just so grateful for every twist and turn in the journey.
Most definitely. And I'm sure some of the fans are looking forward to it. I'm personally very much looking forward to the album as well. Um, kind of like you said early also in the interview, you moved to Turkey in the midst of the pandemic in 2020. What's your relationship now with the States, having lived abroad in Turkey those past several years? Is there kind of like a cultural shock in a sense when you return here to the States?
Man, great question. Yeah, there really, really is. The longer I stay away, the harder it is to adjust to being back there. I still love our people and I love all our people. I care about all of our people. Um, and I really feel for them. And I'm still one of us, you know what I mean? Like I'm an American. I was raised there. I still see all these like tendencies in myself. You know what I mean? Like when I'm in a group of people and everyone's walking on the street, I just have to walk faster than everybody. Like why? For what? You know what I mean? Why? I don't know. I just have to. I have to you know what I mean? Or like sometimes if I get in like an argument with a taxi driver or something, I'm like, oh, we're definitely gonna fight. You know what I mean? And they're just like, "What are you talking about?" You know what I mean? This guy told me one time, he's like, he didn't even speak English very well, but he goes, "I think you're crazy." And I'm like, "Yeah, I probably am." And I was just like, "Man, I'm from America, man. We fight over everything and we compete with each other over everything, and
And hurt each other over
but
everything too.
what's that?"
And hurt each other over everything too, unfortunately.
Over everything. Yeah, I mean, that's America is a war. It is a war. There's not a peaceful moment in America. To be an American is to be at war with yourself and everyone else at all times. And it's weird. You go to other countries, and yes, they've had their conflicts. So like Turkey has had its conflicts, but they've also had there's like the people of this land have a shared history in this land that goes back further than any of their conflicts. Americans don't have that. Like Americans were Europeans that came to another place where they weren't at home. They tried their best to kill all the people who that was their home, and then they brought another group of people to build it for free by force. And then when other Europeans came, they didn't even accept them when they showed up. You know what I mean? When the Irish showed up, they weren't accepted. When the Polish showed up, they weren't accepted. When the Italians showed up, they weren't accepted. They had to lose their Polishness, their Italianness, their Irishness, and just become white. You know what I mean? And the same thing with the Jewish community. The Jewish community is still kind of in limbo because, like, they're white and they aren't. You know what I mean? They're white in society, but to white supremacists, they're not white. And so Unjust talks about this, and all my like Jewish homies talk about the fact that like they're white and they're not white at the same time, which is just crazy. But like it's a country that's at war with itself. Every time there's a new group of immigrants, they're blamed for everything. Even though it's like all of you are like, what are you talking about? We have no collective memory. Um, you know, People don't get along within communities. It just breeds war. It breeds argument. It breeds, and then also the political system it's really weird to say like the idea of American democracy is like if you can convince everybody of your opinion so that you all vote the same way, then you guys get to control the whole country. So everybody feels like the best thing they can do for their country is argue with everybody. Like it feels like that's the most patriotic thing to do and get rid of and silence anybody that disagrees with you because like we're trying to get our side in power. And there's no shared sense of peoplehood. There's just not. You know what I mean? Nobody has a shared sense of like, yes. So like in Turkey, half the country is secular, half is religious.
Hmm.
And they don't like that about each other. And so you see when you're in public, you see some people have dogs and tattoos and they drink. Some people have hijabs and beards and they don't. Um, but like they know how to share space because they're all Turks. They all believe in being Turkish. They're all Turks. They all speak Turkish. They all believe it. They all do Turkish. So even the secular people are secular in Turkish ways. The religious people are religious in Turkish ways. So as a like foreigner who's religious, like if I show up and wear Turkish religious clothes, even the secular people will be like, "Yeah, I don't like that religion thing, but he's doing it in a Turkish way, which is he's honoring us by that's a Turkish outfit." you
Hmm.
know? So they're like, okay, we'll let that slide. You know what I mean? Um, we don't have that in America. There's no group of people that has that. It's just it's really difficult. But then when you leave, you always have this sense of like, man, I abandoning my work? Am I abandoning the cause? Am I abandoning my people? Um, you know, and at this phase of my life, I also have me and my wife have two younger daughters, and they're being raised here. And it's like, yeah, we're sacrificing something of our cultural experience, but what we're prioritizing their safety. Children are not in danger here. It's just a fact. Children are not in danger, not from being abused, not from being shot at their school, not from, they're just not in danger. I mean, there's secondhand smoke and people drive crazy, but not from like intentional harm from other people. They don't know anything about that. They
Mhm.
never heard of it. You know what I'm saying? They never heard. No, these people have never heard of harming children. They can't fathom it.
It's just a completely different way of living than here in the States.
Yeah, and I mean the internet sucks, and it's it's like one of the things is that you really learn like how living in a capitalist society has impacted your expectations. You'd be like, I'm an anti-capitalist. Okay, until I demand, like, I want a fresh mango right now. I have money. I'll pay $30 if I could just get a fresh mango right now.
Mhm.
You can't have a fresh mango right now because this country's just not set up like that.
Yeah.
Do you know how many people would have to suffer for you to have a fresh mango in the middle of January? You know what I mean? We're not doing that for you. No. You know what I mean? You can have cherries because they grow here, and you can have them during the 2.5 month, during the 8 weeks when they're in season.
Mhm.
You can have, we got great tangerines. You can have to wait till they're in season, and then then you can have then you can have it. There's like these expectations of like, if I have the money, I demand whatever I want, and I demand it immediately. And when you live in another that's some place that's not a first world country, you start realizing like how our expectations are fueling all this stuff. Slavery happened because of people's demand for excessive cotton so that they could wear more clothes than they needed, so they could own more clothes than they needed. Excessive demand for tobacco so that they could smoke, and excessive demand for sugar, which mostly was being used for rum. So smoking, drinking, and being fly is what drove the slave trade. You know what I mean? Like there is that thing where like my personal appetites are contributing to all this injustice that I hate in the world. And so, getting my own appetites in check is an extremely important part of standing with justice.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that personal experience of living abroad and just those differences. And, kind of going on that same train of thought as we bring this interview to a close, what advice do you have for people listening to this interview right now that want to get involved and make a positive change wherever they may be in their community or the living conditions of their country, but don't necessarily know what initial steps to take or what direction to go in?
That's a great question. I say focus on community and service. Focus on service. So the people that I know that have been in activism, community organizing, all that stuff, the people that are involved in serving others directly, those people always have a sense of hope. Those people always find a way to keep going. Those people always are happier if they're directly serving others. The people that I know that are just out here trying to convince other people and argue with other people, and they're pushing policy first or something like that. The people that I know that are arguing about ideas, and that's why they do it. Um, those people usually end up in despair. They're depressed. They're suicidal. It's that's not sustainable. But if it's deeply rooted in directly serving other people, like what am I doing for others? You know what I mean? So it's like, the people that are trying to lead the protest, there's a time for that. But people that's all they do, I don't admire those people. But the people that are like, okay, I believe in this protest. I'm gonna go make sure everybody's got water. I'm gonna go help people clean their eyes from tear gas. I'm gonna go and look after the kids of the people that are protesting. I'm gonna go out here and see if I can treat people. Like to really start with serving other people. It's like that's just where to start. I'm not saying that's it. There does have to be policy. There does have to be education. There does have to be, you do got to fight as well. The fight has to be part of it. But if it's rooted in service first, that will be sustainable on a human level, on a heart level. Serving others is what feeds the heart. And so people that are like, okay, we got a problem with homelessness, houselessness, however you want to describe it. I got to go fight at City Hall and da da da. Yes, that's cool. But also, those people need blankets. Those people need sandwiches. Those people need showers. Those people need, and you might not be able to, because that's where you start realizing, like, I might not be able to solve this problem, but if I feed one person, I have solved a person's problem. And I do have the capacity to do that. So, like, what is it about my ego that makes me out here want to solve the world's problem? And there's a person a lot of times directly across the hall from me that has a real problem that I can solve. I can solve their problem, but like, why don't I want to do that? But the second we do it, it feeds the heart, and then the heart comes back to life. And the heart is really what fuels everything humans do comes from the heart. Healthy, loving hearts, open hearts, only good comes from them. And if the heart is, constricted and starved and hard and rigid and mean spirited, nothing good will come out of that. Doesn't mean you can say all the right words, you can go to all the right protests, you can be on the right side of it, you can win every argument. Nothing good comes from hearts like that. And the movement will make you hard-hearted if you're not deeply connected spiritually and serving other people. That's the way it looks to me anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that insight. If people want to support you and follow you, where can they do that to keep up with all your work, all the upcoming shows and album releases and your latest music?
Best thing you can do for any independent, business, you know, artist, movement, anything like that is sign their email list, because then we don't have to rely on social media. And if you don't like the emails, then you can just delete them when you get them. Um, yeah, so brotherali.com is mine. If you hit that email link, then you can know about the stuff that we do. We also have something that's similar to a Patreon. We got our podcast, and you can stream the music and all that kind of stuff. But the number one way to support any independent thing is to let them have your email address, and then just open the emails when they send them to you. And if you don't, like I said, if you don't like it, you can delete it immediately.
Well, with that said, do you have any closing comments or anything else you'd like to let our listeners know about yourself or any upcoming music, or just some closing words of wisdom?
Man, I really appreciate you. Like, this felt really good, man. Like, I really appreciate you paying attention like you do. I felt totally comfortable with you, and it means a lot, for others to see and appreciate and acknowledge and share your platform with me. And yeah, I really, really appreciate it very much.
Likewise, and the feeling is quite mutual, Brother Ali. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Internet, the one and only Brother Ali, thank you so much for joining us on the show. We'll have to have you again soon, brother.
Peace, love, salam alaikum.
Thank you. And that's a wrap.